Stereotypes get started for a reason, but they never tell the full story. I'm Thomas, I'm a boudoir photographer here in Denver, and this is how men got started in boudoir photography, part 6. By the 1960s, pop culture had a very specific image of what the male photographer was. On movie screens and in magazines, the male photographer was the guy with the camera who treated women as props. It made for a compelling story for cinema, but it wasn't the real story, because during the entire time, there were men doing this type of work, but in a completely different way. The first is a British photographer named Sam Haskins. And in 1962, he published a book called 5 Girls. And in 1964, he followed it with another book called Cowboy Kate. Both were intimate figure studies. Women photographed with warmth, with narrative, and with a genuine care for the subject. Not as objects, not as props, but as people. At a time when the culture was pushing predatory photographer archetype, Haskins was earning acclaim from both men and women. Critics noted the obvious rapport between Haskins and his subjects, a comfort visible in the images. And that didn't happen by accident. It came from how he worked with them. And in that era, that was rare enough to notice. And in 1970, another photographer, Helmut Newton, was working at the highest levels of the fashion industry. We're talking French Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle. His approach was simple, but radical. He photographed women as powerful, dominant, and self-assured, not as clothing hangers. The fashion houses criticized Newton for making the models more interesting than their clothing, and the feminists criticized him for creating images for the male gaze. He took heat from both sides simultaneously, and that's usually a sign that the work is more nuanced than anyone realizes. And in 1975, the photograph Less Smoking, a woman in a YSL tuxedo shot for French Vogue on a Paris street, became one of the most defining images of female power in the decade. What Haskins and Newton proved, without setting out to prove anything, is that this approach was viable, that men with a camera could earn trust, could handle the work with care, and could create something that served the woman in front of the lens, not just the audience behind it. 2 photographers, 2 different disciplines. One doing intimate figure work and one doing high fashion, but both treating women in front of their camera with intention and respect. Neither one was making a point. They were just doing their work. And their work told a different story than the stereotype. And towards the end of the 1970s and into the early 80s, something else was shifting. A new kind of session was forming, something more private, more personal, and men were building it. But that's a story for the next video, so stay tuned.